My name is Dustin. I am 35 years old, and I never thought I would have to defend my 7-year-old daughter from my own family. I walked in as Sophie sat on the floor, holding her arm, tears streaming down her face. "He is just being a boy," my in-laws insisted. She must have said something to provoke him. They made her apologize to her cousin who hit her. I smiled, picked her up, and left without a word. 2 days later, they got a call that changed everything. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you believe every child deserves to be protected, even from family. Let me give you some context about who we are and how we got here. I work as a software engineer at a tech firm in Seattle. The pay is good, the hours are reasonable, and I have flexibility to be there for my daughter Sophie. I have been divorced from Rebecca for 3 years now. After 8 years of marriage that gradually unraveled due to different priorities and growing apart, the split was relatively amicable compared to some horror stories I have heard, and we both agreed that Sophie should be our primary focus. Sophie is a bright, compassionate first grader who loves art and animals. Her room is plastered with drawings of every creature imaginable, from regular pets to exotic animals she has only seen in books. She has this infectious laugh that can light up a room and a sensitivity that makes her attuned to how others are feeling. Sometimes, I think she is an old soul in a small body. We have a custody arrangement where Sophie spends equal time between Rebecca and me, switching homes every week. It provides stability while allowing her meaningful time with both parents. My former in-laws, George and Martha Wilson, are another story entirely. They live in an affluent neighborhood, in a sprawling house that practically screams old money and traditional values. George made his fortune in commercial real estate development, and Martha comes from banking royalty. They have certain ideas about how children should behave, particularly emphasizing that boys should be tough and girls should be proper. These antiquated notions might have worked in the 1952nd, but they feel particularly harmful in today's world. Rebecca has a brother named Bradley, who married a woman named Heather about 11 years ago. Their son Noah is 9, 2 years older than Sophie, and is clearly the apple of his grandparents' eyes. Bradley inherited his father's business acumen, but none of his work ethic. He and Heather both work for George's company, in positions that seem to require minimal effort with maximum compensation. They are perpetually distracted parents, always on their phones or discussing adult matters, while Noah does whatever he pleases. There has been tension between me and the Wilsons from the beginning. I come from a middle-class background where I was taught to work hard and treat people with respect. The Wilson family operates on different principles, where status and appearance often override basic decency. When Sophie was born, I made it clear that I wanted to raise her to be strong, independent, and kind. This conflicted with Martha's vision of raising a proper young lady who prioritizes pleasing others. Noah has had issues with aggressive behavior toward Sophie for years. When she was 3 and he was 5, he pushed her off a playground structure because she was in his way. When she was 5, he deliberately destroyed a painting she had made as a gift for her grandparents because they were praising her work. Last Christmas, he grabbed a new doll she had received and threw it in the pool because he said dolls are stupid. After each incident, Bradley and Heather would offer a cursory "boys will be boys," or "they need to work it out themselves." George and Martha would inevitably find a way to suggest Sophie had somehow contributed to the problem. I have tried addressing these concerns multiple times. I spoke privately with Rebecca, who acknowledged the problem, but was reluctant to confront her parents. I talked directly with Bradley and Heather, who dismissed me as being too sensitive about normal childhood conflicts. I even had a sit-down conversation with George and Martha, who politely listened before suggesting that perhaps Sophie needed to toughen up a bit if she was going to succeed in the real world. The impact on Sophie has been noticeable. She used to eagerly anticipate family gatherings, but gradually began asking if she had to go to events at the Wilsons. She would become quiet and withdrawn in the days leading up to these visits. I noticed she would bring fewer of her treasured possessions along, presumably to prevent Noah from damaging them. Rebecca noticed it too, but maintained that family connections were important and that Sophie needed to learn to navigate difficult personalities. The Wilsons host an annual summer barbecue at their estate, an elaborate affair with catered food, hired staff, and typically about 50 guests from their social and business circles. Sophie and I were invited, as we are every year. I was reluctant to attend given the previous incidents, but Rebecca insisted it would be good for Sophie to spend time with her extended family. Despite my misgivings, I agreed to go for Sophie's sake, hoping that in such a public setting, everyone would be on their best behavior. I had no idea that decision would lead to the confrontation that would ultimately change the family dynamic forever. The morning of the barbecue, Sophie was a bundle of mixed emotions. She was excited about swimming in her grandparents' enormous pool with its adjacent water slide, but nervous about interacting with Noah. As we got ready, she carefully selected her favorite blue sundress and asked if she could bring her new art supplies, a professional grade-colored pencil set I had given her for her recent birthday. I hesitated, knowing how possessive she was of them, but eventually agreed when she promised to keep them safely in her backpack, except when using them. "Daddy, do you think Noah will be nice today?" she asked, as we climbed into my Honda Civic for the 30-minute drive to the upscale suburb where the Wilsons lived. "I hope so, sweetheart," I replied, not wanting to lie but also not wanting to increase her anxiety. "Remember what we talked about, though. If anyone, even family, makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, you come find me right away, okay?" She nodded solemnly, clutching her backpack close. The drive took us from our modest neighborhood into increasingly affluent areas, the houses growing larger and the lawns more manicured with each passing mile. Finally, we turned onto Oak Ridge Lane, where the Wilson estate sat behind an ornate iron gate at the end of a circular driveway. As we pulled up, I could see the staff had been busy since dawn. White tents dotted the expansive back lawn. A catering truck was parked discreetly at the side entrance. The smell of barbecue already filled the air, though it was only 11 in the morning. Several luxury vehicles were already parked in the designated area, indicating some guests had arrived early. George Wilson appeared at the front door as we walked up, his imposing 6'3" frame filling the doorway. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and his polo shirt and slacks screamed casual affluence. "Dustin, good to see you made it," he said, offering a handshake that was a bit too firm to be friendly. "And Sophie, have not you grown?" His tone softened slightly when addressing his granddaughter. But there was always something performative about his affection. Martha appeared beside him, elegant in a designer sundress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Sophie, darling," she said, bending slightly to be at eye level. "What an interesting outfit choice. I just bought some lovely dresses that might suit you better next time." Sophie shrunk a little at the thinly veiled criticism. Inside, we found that Rebecca had already arrived and was chatting with her sister Amanda and Amanda's husband Thomas. Their twin daughters, Lily and Emma, both 6, were sitting quietly on a sofa looking at tablets. Rebecca greeted Sophie warmly and gave me a cordial nod. Our post-divorce relationship was civil but distant, focused primarily on Sophie's well-being. "Noah is not here yet," Rebecca informed Sophie, who visibly relaxed at this news. "Bradley and Heather texted that they are running late. Why not go play with your cousins until lunch?" Sophie approached Lily and Emma cautiously. The twins were always impeccably dressed in coordinating outfits, and today was no exception in their matching pink dresses with white cardigans. They were nice enough to Sophie but had clearly absorbed some of their grandmother's formal demeanor. The adults migrated to the back patio where staff were serving mimosas and Bloody Marys. Martha led the conversation, subtly highlighting recent charitable events she had chaired and dropping names of important people they socialized with. George occasionally interjected with comments about the market or business acquisitions. Amanda and Thomas, who were successful in their own right but not to the Wilson standard, mainly nodded along. Rebecca seemed comfortable in this environment, occasionally contributing stories from her work as a pharmaceutical sales representative. I mostly observed, sipping water since I would be driving later. My thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Bradley, Heather, and Noah. The boy burst through the patio doors, clutching a new drone that looked quite expensive. "Look what Dad got me," he announced to no one in particular. Noah had his father's stocky build and his mother's sharp features. He was dressed in designer children's clothes that seemed impractical for a day of outdoor play. "Is that the new XTR model?" "Must have cost a pretty penny," George commented approvingly. "That is my grandson, only the best." The adults duly admired the drone while Noah preened under the attention. Sophie had emerged from the house upon hearing the commotion. She stood slightly behind me, eyeing Noah warily. "Can I fly it now, Dad?" Noah demanded rather than asked. "Maybe later, champ," Bradley replied without looking up from his phone. "Go play with your cousins for now." Noah spotted Sophie and narrowed his eyes slightly before turning his attention to the twins. "Hey, want to see my new drone? It can go super high and has a camera." Lily and Emma nodded enthusiastically and followed Noah toward the pool area. Sophie hesitated before trailing behind them. Casting a glance back at me, I gave her an encouraging smile, but made a mental note to keep an eye on the situation. The next hour passed relatively smoothly. The children swam in the pool under the watchful eye of the lifeguard the Wilsons had hired for the event. More guests began to arrive, mostly business associates of George and their families. The catering staff set up an elaborate spread, including a carving station, a raw bar, and a dessert table that looked like something from a magazine. As lunch was served, I observed the subtle but distinct family dynamics on display. Bradley and Noah were given preferential treatment, served first, and given the choicest portions. Martha fussed over Noah, making sure his plate had all his favorites, while simultaneously commenting that Sophie should watch her portions if she wants to keep her figure. Sophie was 7 years old. The conversation over lunch further revealed the family values. George regaled the table with stories of Noah's baseball prowess, how he was showing those other kids who is boss on the field. Bradley chimed in about how they were encouraging Noah to be aggressive in sports, because that is how you get ahead in life. When Amanda mentioned that Lily had won a school award for a science project, the response was polite but muted. When Sophie quietly shared that her art had been selected for a school display, Martha commented, "That is nice, dear, though practical skills might serve you better in the long run." After lunch, the children dispersed again to play. I noticed Noah becoming increasingly rough in the pool, splashing the younger children aggressively and hogging the water slide. Bradley and Heather were engrossed in conversation with some of George's business associates, completely ignoring their son's behavior. Rebecca had drifted into a discussion with some of Martha's friends, leaving me to keep watch over Sophie. The afternoon wore on, and my discomfort grew as I observed the family interactions. There was a clear pecking order, with Noah at the top of the child hierarchy and Sophie near the bottom. I was considering suggesting we leave early when my phone buzzed with a call from my team lead at work. There was an issue with a project due on Monday, and they needed my input urgently. "I need to take this," I told Rebecca. "Can you keep an eye on Sophie for a few minutes?" She nodded distractedly, already turning back to her conversation. I stepped away to a quiet corner of the patio, expecting the call to be brief. Unfortunately, the problem was more complex than anticipated, and troubleshooting stretched from 5 minutes to 15. I was just wrapping up when I heard crying from inside the house. Something told me immediately that it was Sophie. I ended the call abruptly and rushed toward the sound. The crying was coming from the downstairs playroom, a large space filled with toys that probably cost more than my car, but rarely saw actual use. What I saw when I entered the room made my blood run cold. Sophie was sitting on the floor, tears streaming down her face, holding her right arm close to her body. Her backpack was upended, its contents scattered across the floor. Her precious art supplies were strewn about, several of the expensive colored pencils snapped in half. Martha was standing over her with a stern expression. George was next to her, arms crossed. Noah stood a few feet away, a smug expression on his face as he clutched Sophie's art case, now broken along its hinge. "What happened?" I demanded, rushing to Sophie's side and kneeling beside her. "Nothing to get worked up about," Martha said dismissively. "The children had a little disagreement over sharing. She would not let me see her stupid pencils." Noah interjected, not a hint of remorse in his voice. "I just wanted to look at them." Noah asked to use Sophie's art supplies, and she refused. George elaborated, as if this explanation justified whatever had transpired. "He is just being a boy. She needs to learn to share her things." "She must have said something to provoke him," Martha added. "You know how sensitive he can be." I turned my attention to Sophie, gently asking, What happened, sweetheart? Between sobs. Sophie explained. I was drawing a picture for Grandma and Grandpa. Noah came in and wanted my special pencils. I said he could use the regular ones in the desk, but he grabbed my arm really hard and pushed me down. Then he took my case and broke it. I carefully examined her arm. There was a distinct red mark in the shape of fingers wrapping around her small forearm, already beginning to darken into what would definitely be a bruise. I looked up to see Heather had entered the room, still scrolling through her phone. She glanced up briefly. Kids play rough sometimes, she said with a shrug. Noah probably did not mean to hurt her. Where is Bradley? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. Taking a business call, Heather replied. Look, this is not a big deal. Children need to work these things out themselves. That was when Martha did something that crossed a line I did not even know existed until that moment. She looked down at Sophie and said firmly, Now, Sophie, you need to apologize to Noah for not sharing your art supplies with him. Sophie looked up in confusion, tears still wet on her cheeks. But he hurt me, she whispered. That is not the point, George stated flatly. In this family, we share. Noah is your cousin, and he just wanted to play with you. Now be a good girl and apologize. I watched in disbelief as Martha guided my injured daughter to stand up and face Noah, who still had not relinquished his hold on her broken art case. Say you are sorry for not sharing, Martha instructed. Sophie, confused and hurt, looked to me with pleading eyes. Before I could intervene, Martha added, This is how young ladies behave, Sophie. They know how to smooth over difficult situations. With trembling lips, Sophie whispered, I am sorry for not sharing. Noah did not respond except to roll his eyes. He tossed the broken case onto the floor where it clattered against the hardwood. There, Martha said with satisfaction. All resolved. Now run along and play nicely. In that moment, I made a decision. I could have exploded in anger, created a scene that would have given the Wilsons ammunition to paint me as unstable. I could have demanded Noah apologize, which would have resulted in a forced, meaningless response at best. Instead, I chose a different path. With deliberate calm, I smiled. Not a warm smile, but one that never reached my eyes. I bent down and gently picked Sophie up, cradling her against my chest. With my free hand, I collected her backpack and gathered what I could of her art supplies. Sophie and I will be leaving now, I said, my voice level. Do not be ridiculous, Martha scoffed. The barbecue is not even half over. There is cake coming for dessert. Thank you for the invitation, I replied, already turning toward the door. We have somewhere else we need to be. Well, this is certainly dramatic, George commented. The children had a disagreement. It happens all the time. Some people are just too sensitive these days. I did not respond. I simply walked out, Sophie still in my arms, through the house and to my car. I could feel eyes on us as we crossed the lawn, guests curious about our abrupt departure. Rebecca appeared on the front porch just as I was buckling Sophie into her seat. Where are you going? She asked, confused. What happened? Ask your parents, I replied. Better yet, ask your nephew. Sophie and I are done for today. As I drove away, I could see Rebecca's perplexed expression in the rearview mirror. She had no idea that I had just made a decision that would reverberate through her family in ways none of them could anticipate. Sophie was quiet in the back seat, occasionally sniffling. Am I in trouble, Daddy? She finally asked in a small voice. Absolutely not, I assured her. You did nothing wrong. And I promise you, this will never happen again. I meant every word. The drive home was quiet at first. Sophie sat in the back seat, cradling her arm and occasionally wiping away tears. About halfway home, she finally spoke up. Daddy, why did I have to say sorry when Noah hurt me? Is it because he is a boy and I am a girl? Her question broke my heart and strengthened my resolve simultaneously. I chose my words carefully, wanting to be honest, without burdening her with adult complexities. No, sweetheart, you should not have had to apologize. What Noah did was wrong, and the adults should have made him apologize to you. But Grandma and Grandpa said, sometimes I interrupted gently. Even grandparents can be wrong. No one has the right to hurt you, ever, no matter who they are. And you never have to apologize for protecting yourself or your belongings. She was quiet for a moment, processing this. So, I did not do anything bad? You did absolutely nothing wrong, I assured her. I am proud of you for telling the truth about what happened. When we got home, I had Sophie sit at the kitchen table while I prepared her favorite comfort food, grilled cheese with tomato soup. As she ate, I examined her arm more carefully. The mark had darkened significantly, forming a distinct bruise in the shape of fingers. The sight of it made my stomach clench with anger, but I maintained a calm demeanor for Sophie's sake. Does it hurt much? I asked, gently applying an ice pack wrapped in a kitchen towel. It is sore, she admitted. And it hurts when I move it this way. She demonstrated, wincing slightly. I took several photos of the injury from multiple angles, making sure the bruising pattern was clearly visible. Then, I made a phone call. Hello, this is Dr. Rivera's office, came the receptionist's voice. This is Dustin Mitchell, Sophie Mitchell's father. I need to schedule an appointment as soon as possible. There has been an incident, and Sophie has a significant bruise on her arm. The receptionist, hearing the urgency in my voice, arranged for us to come in first thing Monday morning, less than 24 hours away. After hanging up, I found Sophie in the living room, attempting to organize what remained of her art supplies. Several expensive pencils were broken beyond repair, and the case itself had a cracked hinge that prevented it from closing properly. We will get you new ones, I promised, sitting beside her on the couch. It is not just that, she said, her voice small. Noah always breaks my things and nobody ever makes him stop. And then they make me say sorry, like I did something wrong. I pulled her gently into a hug, careful of her injured arm. I want you to listen to me, Sophie. Your body belongs to you, and nobody has the right to hurt it. Your things belong to you, and nobody has the right to take them or break them. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to set boundaries. And I will always, always back you up on that. She nestled against me, and we sat quietly for a few minutes. Then she asked, what about Thanksgiving and Christmas? Will Noah hurt me again? The question triggered something in me. As a systems architect, I was trained to identify problems, analyze their components, and implement systematic solutions. I realized I needed to approach this family situation with the same methodical precision. No, I said firmly. Things are going to be different from now on. I promise you that. After Sophie went to bed that night, clutching her stuffed elephant for comfort, I sat at my computer and began my research. I looked into school policies on bullying and violence. I reviewed legal definitions of assault as it pertained to minors. I created a detailed document outlining every incident involving Noah's aggression towards Sophie that I could remember, with dates, descriptions, and how the adults had responded each time. A pattern emerged clearly. Noah's behavior had been escalating, from verbal taunts to destroying possessions to now causing physical harm. The adults in his life had consistently dismissed, minimized, or even encouraged his actions, while often placing blame on his victims, particularly Sophie. My phone rang around 11:30. It was Rebecca. What happened today? She demanded. My parents said you overreacted to a minor squabble between the kids. Did they show you Sophie's arm? I asked calmly. What about her arm? Noah grabbed her hard enough to leave finger-shaped bruises, then pushed her down and broke her art supplies. Your parents and Bradley and Heather saw the marks and did nothing. In fact, they made Sophie apologize to Noah. There was silence on the line. Then, that cannot be right. I have photos, I replied. I will send them to you right now. We have an appointment with Dr. Rivera tomorrow morning. I emailed the photos while still on the phone. I heard the notification sound on her end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, she whispered. I had no idea it was this bad. I was in the front yard talking to Amanda when it happened. This has been building for years, Rebecca. Every time Noah hurts Sophie, everyone makes excuses for him and blames her. It has to stop. I will talk to my parents, she promised. That is not enough this time, I said firmly. Sophie is physically injured. This goes beyond family disagreements now. What are you planning to do? Her voice had an edge of worry. What any parent should do when their child is hurt. Make sure it never happens again. After we hung up, I made one more call to a friend from college, Leslie, who now worked as a school counselor. If this happened at school, what would the protocol be? I asked, after explaining the situation. Immediate intervention, she said without hesitation. Documentation of the injury, statements from all parties involved, notification of parents, possible suspension for the aggressor, and mandated counseling. Schools take physical violence very seriously these days, and if the parents dismiss it as boys being boys, Leslie sighed. Unfortunately common, but not acceptable. The school would still implement consequences regardless of the parent's attitude. In severe cases, especially with a pattern of behavior, outside agencies might be notified. Thanks, Leslie. That helps clarify my next steps. Before going to bed, I received another text from Rebecca. I spoke with my mother. She says you are blowing this out of proportion and that Sophie bruises easily. She says Noah barely touched her. I responded simply by sending a close-up photo of the clearly defined finger marks on Sophie's arm. Rebecca did not reply. As I tried to fall asleep, my mind was racing with the components of a plan. I knew confronting the Wilsons directly would only result in defensiveness and denials. I needed a systematic approach that would force accountability. By the time I drifted off, I had the framework of a strategy that would change everything. Monday morning, Sophie and I arrived at Dr. Rivera's office at 8:30 sharp. Sophie was quiet, but seemed more at ease than the previous day. I had always appreciated Dr. Rivera's approach with children, kind but straightforward, and today was no exception. Let us take a look at that arm, she said, gently examining the bruise, which had darkened overnight. Can you tell me what happened, Sophie? Sophie recounted the incident clearly, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. Dr. Rivera listened attentively, asking occasional clarifying questions while taking notes. This is definitely consistent with a forceful grab, Dr. Rivera confirmed after the examination. The pattern of bruising clearly indicates fingers gripping with significant pressure. This was not an accident or normal rough housing. She turned to me with a serious expression. As a mandatory reporter, I need to ask, is Sophie safe at home and in her current environments? She is safe with me and her mother, I assured her. The incident occurred with her cousin at her grandparents' house. I removed her from the situation immediately, and she will not be in unsupervised contact with that cousin again. Dr. Rivera nodded, documenting everything in Sophie's file. I am going to recommend a brief consultation with Dr. Chen, our child psychologist. This kind of incident can have emotional impacts beyond the physical injury. She provided official medical documentation of the injury, complete with photographs and her professional assessment. Before we left, she added, Dustin, children need to know that adults will protect them. You did the right thing bringing her in and taking this seriously. Our next stop was Sophie's school, where I had scheduled a meeting with her teacher, Miss Johnson. While Sophie waited in the library with a classroom aide, I showed Miss Johnson the medical documentation and explained the situation. I have noticed Sophie becoming more withdrawn recently, Miss Johnson confided. Last week, she was reluctant to share her art supplies with classmates, which is unusual for her. When I asked why, she said sometimes sharing means watching her things get broken. That makes sense given what has been happening with her cousin, I replied. I want to make sure the school is aware of the situation, in case Sophie needs additional support. Thank you for letting me know, Miss Johnson said. We have a zero-tolerance policy for physical aggression here. All children deserve to feel safe. She made notes in Sophie's file and promised to monitor for any behavioral changes. That afternoon, while Sophie was at a scheduled playdate with a friend from school, I attended the appointment with Dr. Chen. The child therapist, Dr. Rivera, had recommended, based on what you have described, Sophie is experiencing a toxic family dynamic that could have long-term effects if not addressed. Dr. Chen explained, after hearing the full history. Children who are repeatedly victimized, especially when adults dismiss or blame them, can develop issues with self-worth and boundaries. What can I do to help her? I asked. You have already taken the most important step by validating her experience and showing her that you will protect her, Dr. Chen assured me. I would recommend a few sessions for Sophie to process what happened and clear boundaries regarding future family interactions. As we discussed strategies for supporting Sophie, I mentioned Noah's apparent behavioral issues. It sounds like this boy needs intervention as well, Dr. Chen observed. Without appropriate boundaries and consequences, this pattern will likely escalate as he gets older. Where does he attend school? Westridge Academy, I replied. Naming the elite private school many wealthy families in the area selected, Dr. Chen's expression changed slightly. I know some of the counselors there. They have excellent resources for behavioral intervention, if the family is willing to utilize them. This information sparked the next phase of my plan. After leaving Dr. Chen's office, I made a phone call to someone I had not spoken to in several years, Thomas Anderson, my college roommate, who now worked as an administrator at Westridge Academy. Dustin, good to hear from you, Thomas said when he returned my call. It has been too long. I wish I were calling under better circumstances, I replied, before explaining the situation with Noah and Sophie. I cannot comment specifically on any student's record, Thomas said carefully when I finished. But speaking hypothetically, if a student has exhibited a pattern of aggressive behavior, our protocol involves documentation, parent conferences, and appropriate interventions. If incidents occur off campus but are reported to us, we still have an obligation to address concerns, especially if there is a pattern that might affect the school environment. Hypothetically, I asked, would it matter if the student's family were significant donors to the school? Thomas paused before answering. Every school faces those pressures, but Westridge has become much more transparent in recent years after some unfortunate incidents. Documentation and formal reporting are key in ensuring all students are held to the same standards. I thanked him for the information and promised to send the medical documentation through official channels. After hanging up, I did some additional research and discovered that Noah participated in an exclusive youth baseball league that prided itself on character development and sportsmanship. I contacted the league director, again presenting the documentation of Sophie's injury and inquiring about their policies regarding off-field behavior. We take character development very seriously, the director assured me. All players and families sign a code of conduct that extends beyond game days. While we do not normally get involved in family matters, documented physical aggression would certainly warrant review by our ethics committee, especially with a pattern of behavior. By Wednesday morning, 2 days after the incident, I had compiled a comprehensive file, medical documentation, the incident history, statements from Dr. Chen and Ms. Johnson about the potential impacts, and formal submissions to both Westridge Academy and the Baseball League. I then composed a carefully worded email to George and Martha Wilson, copying Bradley, Heather, and Rebecca. The email was factual and unemotional, simply outlining what had occurred, attaching the medical documentation, and stating clearly that Sophie would not be in any situation with Noah without direct supervision until he received appropriate intervention for his aggressive behavior. I concluded with, I am open to family mediation with a neutral third party if you would like to discuss this further. My only concern is ensuring all children in the family are safe and learning appropriate boundaries. I sent the email, then turned my attention to Sophie's recovery. We scheduled regular sessions with Dr. Chen and planned a special father-daughter weekend trip to the coast, her favorite place to relax and recharge. While I waited for the inevitable fallout, I focused on helping Sophie regain her confidence and sense of security. The Wilsons had no idea what was coming, but they were about to learn that actions have consequences, even for those who believe themselves above such concerns. Thursday morning, 2 days after the incident, I was at work trying to focus on coding a new feature for our project. My phone had been buzzing repeatedly with notifications, but I had deliberately left it in my desk drawer while I concentrated. During my coffee break, I finally checked it to find multiple missed calls and messages from Martha, George, Bradley, and Rebecca. The first voicemail was from Martha, her voice tight with controlled anger. Dustin, this is Martha Wilson. I think you are blowing this childish squabble way out of proportion. Call me back immediately so we can discuss your overreaction. The second was from George, more threatening in tone. "This is George Wilson. I do not appreciate you making formal complaints that could damage our family reputation over what amounts to normal roughhousing between cousins. We should handle family matters within the family." Bradley's message was defensive. "Hey, it is Bradley. Look, Noah was just playing rough. He is a boy. That is what they do. You are making this into a federal case for no reason. Back off, man." The most recent voicemail, left just 30 minutes ago, was Martha again, but her tone had completely changed. "Dustin, please call me back as soon as possible. There has been a situation with Noah's school. This is getting out of hand." As I was listening to the messages, a text came through from Rebecca. "Westridge Academy just called my parents. Noah is being suspended, pending an investigation. They mentioned pattern of concerning behavior and required a psychological evaluation before he can return. My father is livid. What did you do?" I texted back simply. I reported what happened to Sophie, with medical documentation. The school made their own decision based on their policies. My phone rang almost immediately. It was George Wilson. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" he demanded without preamble. "Do you have any idea what you have set in motion? The headmaster called me in for an emergency meeting this morning. Noah has been suspended and cannot return until he completes a behavioral assessment. They are talking about mandated counseling. That sounds like an appropriate response to a child who physically hurt his younger cousin," I replied calmly. "This goes beyond Sophie's arm," George continued, his voice rising. "Apparently there have been incidents at school that were handled quietly until now. 3 disciplinary actions, this term, alone. Now with your formal complaint, they are saying they have to follow official protocols. Again, that seems appropriate," I said. "Do you have any idea how this looks for our family? We have donated substantial amounts to that school. We are on the board. For God's sake, maybe this is an opportunity for Noah to get the help he needs," I suggested. George was not interested in my perspective. "That is not all. The baseball league called. Noah has been removed from the tournament roster pending review by their ethics committee. Do you know how much we have invested in his baseball career? The connections we have made? I am more concerned about Sophie's well-being," I replied. "This is absurd. He is 9 years old. You are trying to ruin his future over a momentary loss of temper. No, I am trying to protect my daughter and potentially help your grandson learn appropriate behavior before he causes more serious harm. Sophie deserves to be safe. And frankly, Noah deserves adults who will teach him better coping skills." George hung up without another word. Later that day, Rebecca called. Her voice was strained. "My parents are blaming me for not controlling you," she said. "They think I should have prevented you from making this official. You saw the bruises, Rebecca. What was I supposed to do? Pretend it did not happen? Let Sophie think it is okay for people to hurt her?" She sighed heavily. "I know. They are my parents. Dustin. And Noah is my nephew. And Sophie is your daughter." I reminded her gently. "She needs both of us to stand up for her." Amanda called, Rebecca said after a pause. She told me that Noah pushed Lily down the stairs at Christmas last year, when no one was looking. Lily was too afraid to tell anyone because Noah threatened to break her tablet if she did. Amanda has been keeping the girls away from him as much as possible. This was new information. Why is she telling you this now? Because my mother called her, trying to get her to back up their version of events. Instead, Amanda finally spoke up about what has been happening with her daughters too. The situation continued to unfold rapidly over the next 24 hours. Bradley and Heather were called in for a parent conference at Westridge Academy, where they were presented with a comprehensive record of Noah's behavior issues. Without the Wilson name providing protection, the school was now following standard protocols for aggressive behavior. The following day, Rebecca called again. "My parents have called a family meeting for Sunday. They want you there. I am not bringing Sophie," I said immediately. "No, just adults. Amanda and Thomas will be there too." I agreed to attend, curious to see how the Wilsons would attempt to manage this situation now that it had escalated beyond their control. Sunday arrived, and I entered the Wilson home for the first time since the incident. The atmosphere was tense. George and Martha sat stiffly in their formal living room. Bradley and Heather looked uncomfortable on one sofa. Amanda and Thomas sat close together on another, their posture defensive. Rebecca and I took the remaining seats, maintaining a careful distance from each other. George cleared his throat to begin what was clearly a prepared speech, but Amanda surprised everyone by speaking first. "Before we start making excuses for Noah, I need to say something," she announced, her voice shaking slightly. "This has been going on for years. Noah has pushed, hit, and threatened my daughters multiple times. We have tried to handle it quietly, but I cannot stay silent anymore." Martha looked shocked. "Amanda, what are you saying? Children have disagreements all the time." "This is not normal disagreement, Mother," Amanda insisted. "This is a pattern of deliberate aggression that everyone has been ignoring. I have been limiting the girls' contact with Noah for over a year because I do not trust him not to hurt them." Bradley turned to her angrily. "So, you are ganging up on my son too? He is just high-spirited." Thomas, usually quiet in family gatherings, spoke up. "High-spirited does not leave bruises, Bradley. We have documented incidents too. We just did not want to cause family conflict. But this has gone too far." The meeting devolved into accusations and defensiveness. Martha attempted to blame me for escalating the situation, but her argument lost steam when Amanda pulled out her phone and showed photos of a bruise on Lily's back from a previous incident. George, seeing his authority in the family crumbling, finally addressed the real issue. "The school board is requiring family therapy before Noah can return. His spot on the baseball team is in jeopardy." The Hendersons asked if Noah would still be attending their son's birthday party next weekend. "Word is spreading." "Maybe it needed to spread," I suggested. "Maybe this has been kept quiet for too long." Heather, who had been scrolling through her phone as usual, finally looked up. "Noah's therapist called yesterday. She says he has significant issues with impulse control and empathy. She wants to see all of us for family sessions." This admission seemed to puncture Martha's remaining defenses. She suddenly looked older, her perfect posture slumping slightly. "How did we get here?" she whispered. The conversation gradually shifted from blame to reluctant acknowledgement that there was indeed a serious problem that required intervention. By the end of the 3-hour meeting, tentative agreements had been reached. Noah would complete the required therapy. Bradley and Heather would attend parenting classes, and new rules would be established for family gatherings. As I was leaving, Martha pulled me aside. Her voice was quiet, lacking its usual authoritative tone. "Rebecca showed me the photos of Sophie's arm. I did not realize how bad it was. I should have done something when it happened. It was the closest thing to an apology I expected to receive." And I acknowledged it with a nod. The following week brought another unexpected development. Martha called and asked to meet me for coffee. Alone. Curious. I agreed. She looked tired when she arrived at the cafe, the careful makeup not quite concealing the strain of recent events. "The neighbors are talking," she began. "The Prestons uninvited us from their charity gala. 20 years of friendship, gone because they heard about Noah hurting his cousins. I am sorry about the social complications," I said, not entirely sincerely. "But my focus has to be on Sophie's well-being." "I know," she admitted. "That is why I wanted to talk to you. I received a call from Westridge yesterday. They have interviewed several children who have had incidents with Noah. It is worse than we thought, Dustin. Much worse." She looked down at her untouched coffee. "Noah has been bullying children at school systematically, threatening them if they told anyone. The school kept it quiet because of our donations and George's position on the board. They were wrong to do that. And we were wrong to let them." This level of self-awareness from Martha was unexpected. I waited for her to continue. "The therapist says Noah needs significant intervention. Bradley and Heather are in denial, but the evidence is too strong to ignore anymore." She looked up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I failed him, Dustin. I failed all the children by allowing this to continue." In that moment, I saw Martha, not as the intimidating matriarch of the Wilson family, but as a grandmother facing the consequences of years of misguided priorities. It is not too late to make changes, I offered. Noah is still young. With proper guidance, he can learn better ways to interact with others. Sophie's therapist called me, Martha admitted. With your permission, apparently. She explained how these dynamics affect children. I have been doing a lot of thinking about the messages we have been sending. The conversation shifted to practical steps for moving forward. By the time we parted, Martha had committed to family therapy and establishing clear boundaries and consequences, not just for Noah, but for all adult interactions with the children. As I drove home, I reflected on how quickly things had changed. In just 2 weeks, a family system that had operated one way for generations had been forced to confront its dysfunctional patterns. There would be resistance and backsliding, no doubt, but the first crucial steps toward change had been taken. Sophie's arm had healed, the bruise fading to a yellowish shadow. More importantly, her spirit was recovering. In her sessions with Dr. Chen, she was learning to express her feelings and assert her boundaries. She still asked occasionally if Noah would hurt her again at future family gatherings. Things are going to be different now, I assured her. Everyone is learning how to behave better, including the grown-ups, and for the first time, I truly believed that might be possible. 6 weeks after the incident, a meeting was arranged at a neutral location, the office of a family counselor named Dr. Freeman. The attendees included Martha and George, Bradley and Heather, Rebecca, and me. Noah and Sophie were not present for this initial adult conversation. The purpose of today's meeting, Dr. Freeman began, is to establish a framework for healthy family interaction moving forward. Each of you has been working separately on aspects of this situation. But now it is time to come together and align on expectations. The discussion began with tension, as Bradley still harbored resentment over what he saw as an attack on his parenting and his son. You could have just talked to us directly instead of involving the school, he complained. Looking at me, I tried that approach multiple times over the years, I reminded him. Every attempt was dismissed. Noah's behavior continued to escalate until Sophie was physically injured. Bradley, Dr. Freeman interjected gently. From the individual sessions we have had, do you recognize that there has been a pattern of concerning behavior that was not being addressed effectively? Bradley shifted uncomfortably. I guess I did not want to see it. It is easier to dismiss it as normal boy stuff than to admit there might be a real problem. This admission, however reluctant, represented progress. Heather, who had been attending parenting classes as required by Noah's treatment plan, spoke next. The parenting specialist pointed out how often we were on our phones, instead of actually supervising Noah. I never realized how that affected his behavior. He was acting out partly to get our attention. George, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. In my day, boys were expected to be rough. It was seen as preparation for the competitive world they would face as men. I now realize that view is not only outdated but potentially harmful. Martha nodded in agreement. We were encouraging the wrong kind of strength. Real strength includes self-control and respect for others. The conversation gradually shifted from defensiveness to constructive planning. With Dr. Freeman's guidance, the family established new rules for gatherings. First, Dr. Freeman summarized a zero-tolerance policy for physical aggression of any kind. Second, active adult supervision of children at all times. Third, immediate consequences for boundary violations, consistently applied regardless of who the child is. Fourth, regular check-ins to ensure the system is working. We also discussed how to handle the first supervised interaction between Noah and Sophie. Noah's therapist had been working with him on appropriate apologies, and Dr. Freeman suggested a structured meeting. 2 weeks later, Sophie and I returned to Dr. Freeman's office. Noah was already there with Bradley and Heather. Sophie clutched my hand tightly as we entered. Noah looked different, somehow smaller and less confident than the entitled boy who had hurt Sophie. Under his therapist's guidance, he had prepared a proper apology. Sophie, I am sorry I grabbed your arm and pushed you down, he said, his voice steady, but his eyes downcast. I am sorry I broke your art supplies. It was wrong to hurt you and your things. I am learning better ways to act when I feel angry or want something. I hope someday you can forgive me." Sophie listened carefully. Dr. Freeman had prepared her for this moment, explaining that she could accept the apology when she felt ready, but was not obligated to do so immediately. "Thank you for saying sorry," Sophie replied simply. She did not offer forgiveness yet, and that was perfectly okay. The next phase of healing took time. Bradley and Heather continued their parenting classes and family therapy with Noah. George and Martha worked on changing their attitudes about gender expectations and behavior. Rebecca found her voice, setting boundaries with her parents that would have been unthinkable before. Sophie continued her sessions with Dr. Chen, processing her feelings and rebuilding her sense of security. The physical bruise healed completely after 2 weeks, but the emotional healing took longer. Dr. Chen assured me this was normal and that Sophie was showing remarkable resilience. 3 months after the incident, Martha called and asked if she could meet with me privately again. We met at the same cafe as before. "There is something I have never told anyone in the family," she began after we had settled with our coffees. "When I was a child, my older brother was like Noah. He would hurt me, break my things, and my parents would make excuses for him. Boys will be boys," they said, just like I said about Noah. I listened, surprised by this unexpected vulnerability. I promised myself I would never let that happen to my children. Martha continued, her voice thick with emotion. But somehow, I recreated the exact same dynamic with my grandchildren. I became my mother, making excuses for bad behavior and blaming the victims. Breaking generational patterns is incredibly difficult, I offered. It takes conscious effort and usually some outside perspective. "I want to thank you," Martha said, meeting my eyes directly. "If you had not taken a stand, this cycle would have continued. Noah would have grown up thinking his behavior was acceptable. Sophie and the other girls would have grown up thinking they deserved to be treated that way." Her sincerity was unmistakable. "I appreciate that, Martha. I know this has been a difficult process for everyone. I have been doing a lot of thinking about what kind of legacy I want to leave," she admitted. "I always thought it was about social status and maintaining appearances. Now I realize the most important legacy is how we treat each other, especially the youngest and most vulnerable among us." 6 months after the incident, the Wilsons hosted another family gathering. The difference was remarkable. Noah, now receiving proper guidance and structure, was calmer and more controlled. When he became frustrated during a game, he used the techniques his therapist had taught him, stepping away to take deep breaths instead of lashing out. Bradley and Heather were actively engaged, supervising the children rather than scrolling through their phones. George had set up an art table where Sophie could share her supplies with anyone who asked politely. Martha had arranged for each child to have a special role in helping prepare the meal, valuing their contributions equally. Rebecca approached me as I watched Sophie confidently interacting with her cousins. "I never thought my family could change this much," she admitted. "You did the right thing, even when it was difficult." "It was not about punishing anyone," I replied. "It was about making sure Sophie knew her boundaries would be respected." In the end, that helped everyone. The most profound moment came when Noah approached Sophie with a question. "Can you show me how to draw a dragon? You do it really well." Sophie hesitated only briefly before nodding. "You have to hold the pencil like this," she demonstrated, "and be gentle with the pressure." I watched as Noah carefully followed her instructions, treating the art supplies with respect. The sight of them working together peacefully would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. Later, as we drove home, Sophie was animated, chattering about the day's events without the anxiety that had previously accompanied family visits. "Daddy," she said suddenly, her voice becoming serious, "I think Noah is learning to be better." "I think so too," I agreed. "His mom and dad are paying more attention to him now," she observed with the piercing insight children sometimes display. "Maybe that is why he is not so angry anymore." Her comment highlighted a fundamental truth. Children's behavior often reflects their environment. Noah's transformation was as much about the adults changing as it was about him learning new skills. Standing up for Sophie had ripple effects beyond what I could have imagined. It forced an entire family system to examine its dysfunctional patterns and make meaningful changes. It showed Sophie that her boundaries matter and that adults would protect her. And perhaps most surprisingly, it ultimately helped Noah by ensuring he received the guidance and structure he desperately needed. The experience taught me that sometimes the most caring response is not the most comfortable one. Sometimes, true compassion requires setting firm boundaries and insisting on accountability. By refusing to participate in the cycle of excuse-making and victim-blaming, I helped break a generational pattern that was harming everyone involved. I often think about what would have happened if I had simply joined the chorus of adults dismissing Noah's behavior as boys being boys. Sophie would have internalized the message that her boundaries did not matter. Noah would have continued his destructive behavior, likely escalating as he grew older. The cycle would have continued unchecked, possibly for another generation. Instead, one moment of standing firm created the possibility for healing and growth for the entire family. It was not easy, and the journey is far from complete. But the transformation has been remarkable. If you are facing a similar situation in your family, remember that maintaining the peace at all costs is not always the right answer. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give to everyone involved is the courage to address difficult truths with compassion and clarity. Have you ever had to stand up to family members to protect someone you love? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, breaking unhealthy cycles often begins with one person willing to stand firm in what is right.